Welcome to VNN, and we have with us Garnett Genuis, the very active member of Parliament from Sherwood-Fort Saskatchewan in Alberta, and the Conservative Shadow Minister for International Development. He is also a member of the Standing Committee on Immigration. Thank you, MP Genuis, for coming to our studio again. It is enlightening to hear your views on some very important subjects.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure to be back here.
Any comments on the recent statements by many people about more autonomy for Alberta, or what they call provincial sovereignty? How will the Conservative Party deal with this?
Yeah, well, we're going through a provincial leadership race in Alberta right now, and I've been active in that leadership race. I'm an MP, but I'm also a citizen of Alberta, and these issues impact me. I'm supporting a candidate, Travis Taves. Travis Taves was the finance minister under Jason Kenney, and he served very ably in terms of helping recover from the economic problems caused by the NDP. He's not a career politician. He's only been elected for 3 years, but he went straight into being finance minister, and he did an incredible job. He's earned a lot of respect. And he is presenting some moderate proposals for Alberta to push back against Ottawa in some areas where we've seen Ottawa overreaching into provincial jurisdiction. On the other hand, you have a candidate, Danielle Smith, that's pushing this concept of an Alberta Sovereignty Act that I very much disagree with. What she's proposing is effectively that the provincial government could selectively decide to ignore or not enforce or try to prevent the enforcement even of certain federal laws in Alberta. And what I would say is respecting the rule of law. If you have a problem with certain federal laws that you think violate provincial jurisdiction, you can do a challenge in the courts. There are proper ways of proceeding on this. But Danielle Smith's approach is unrealistic. It ignores the rule of law. It would cause far more problems, and it would also cause a different set of problems for Alberta. You know, if you had provinces starting to declare themselves sovereign, you'd have a situation where BC might consider itself sovereign and therefore say no pipeline.
Ontario will say the same thing.
Yeah, exactly. So I think what Albertans want is a strong Canada that respects and includes Alberta and doesn't interfere with Alberta's jurisdiction. And as a federal politician, I think we have a lot of work to do to correct some of the concerns that are felt in various provinces, and that's why we're working to replace the current Liberal government that has been the source of such division. But I think we need a sensible, thoughtful leader like Travis Taves, who's committed to the rule of law at the provincial level.
So is Kenney he's stepping down?
Yeah, Premier Kenney is stepping down. There was an internal party leadership review and some controversies around handling of COVID, and Premier Kenney actually won that review. He got more than 50% of the vote when he decided that the margin was such that it would be difficult for the party to go.
Will he join the federal party?
Well, I don't know what his plans are right now.
He was once upon a time, and I think he was quite admired for his work then at that time.
Yeah, Premier Kenney continues to be very well respected across the country and in Alberta. The COVID period was a challenging one in Alberta. I think the provincial government did make some mistakes. But look, it was an extremely challenging period for anyone.
When there's this recent controversy about a man named Laith Marouf.
Yes.
Who, he's notorious for his wild tweets on Jews, on Indigenous people, on French Canadians. And the Canadian Heritage Fund funded him about up to $600,000. Nobody's taken any responsibility for this. What's happening now?
Yeah, this is a very, very concerning episode. I think one thing to just notice about the discussion of racism in this country is that Liberal politicians expect to get a free pass, even when Liberals are involved or doing things that are clearly racist. So the Prime Minister and the blackface scandal, and you have this latest issue where the government was hiring someone who's posting anti-Semitic tweets, hiring that person to be part of promoting
lectures on anti-racism. Yeah, it's so ridiculous.
It's absurd, and then they just kind of try to push past it by accusing everybody else of being racist. Sometimes you see this pathology where people try to accuse others of what the problem in themselves. And while this is going on, anyone who asks questions about it, you saw this Liberal MP Chris Biddle calling a professor, a respected professor who is raising questions about this, calling him a racist. And this is what Liberals do. They refuse to take responsibility for issues of racism or sexism that exist within their own party, and they try to parry that by always pushing the accusations onto other people.
I mean, there's an Indian fable in which a monkey is full of fleas. So they ask him, what is this? All fleas all over you. He doesn't blame him, so he points to all other monkeys and all other animals. And that's where it is, not him.
Yes. Well, and I mean, take the Prime Minister's response to the blackface issue, going back a bit, but he's saying this is a time for all of us to learn. Right? This is we need to. Well, no, most of us knew that kind of behavior was unacceptable. That was something that he needed to learn. So, and the Prime Minister loves to apologize for what other people have done in other places. Right. I think it takes a lot more genuine humility to offer a personal apology, to apologize for something that I did, and to take responsibility for that. But we don't see that from the government, unfortunately. And look, this is in terms of reckoning with some of these different issues around racial justice. I think that requires individuals to take responsibility for their own actions, not to sort of parry it into this broader, well, someone somewhere needs to do something. Right?
When this, what do you think about this Canada's euthanasia regime? Because it's sort of forcing some very sick people to commit suicide. I mean, how do you build the safeguards in such a program? Isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, so
it's very concerning.
The story's back in the news because a veteran, someone who served our country heroically, was calling Veterans Affairs, seeking help, and basically had the Veterans Affairs employee suggest to him that he consider euthanasia. And it's a horrifying case that happened in the context of Veterans Affairs, but I think it's also equally horrifying that many people who go to the healthcare system, maybe elderly people living with disabilities. I've spoken personally to people who, maybe someone with a disability goes to the hospital with some unrelated issue. I had a friend that had pneumonia, right? And they start, the conversation has shifted now where sometimes things get said like, oh, well, are you sure you want to have oxygen? Are you feeling depressed? Or that immediately the conversation is shifting into things that make people wonder if that's kind of establishing the case for offering them aid. And one of the safeguards that I proposed, and this was last debated in Parliament, was a requirement that the healthcare system not be the one that bring up the conversation. That if the patient starts the conversation and says, I want to know about this, then okay, there's a back and forth, but to at least say that that people would not be proactively told, oh, well, maybe you should think about this, because that's most people when they go to the healthcare system, they don't want to be told about, well, you could die,
live or die.
They want to be offered support to live, and that should be the culture of our medical system, is to promote and offer people life. I would prefer in every case, but certainly at the very least up until the point where the patient is actually asking for something different. We've constantly raised these issues around safeguards, around people being pressured towards death, around people not feeling safe in the healthcare system, especially people who are elderly or living with disabilities. And these concerns have been continually dismissed by Liberals, to the point now where I think some people have a level of nervousness or reluctance even about seeking that help in the first place.
I mean, you had tabled Bill C-257 in Parliament during March. I mean, what is the status of the bill that seeks protected category for political beliefs, political activities?
Yeah, thank you. So I put that bill forward, had a lot of discussion about it. This would add political belief and activity as prohibited grounds of discrimination in the Human Rights Act. I don't think people should be discriminated against, fired from their job, and so forth because of their political belief. If your boss supports a different political party than you, I think you should be free to express your political opinions without fear of retaliation, being denied services, having your bank accounts frozen. Of course, if people cross the line into criminal activity, then they should face consequences. But if people are lawfully advocating political positions that are legal, lawful within Canada, then they shouldn't face discrimination for doing that. The bill's been put forward. It's currently had first reading stage, and we're looking at options for advancing it. There's different tools. It may be that we wait until my name comes up in the order of precedence, or it may be that another member of Parliament wants to take the concept and move it forward. So we'll see, but we're working on that. We think it's an important bill that provides protection Canadians need.
And what's the Conservative Party position on developments in the Indo-Pacific region? Now it's very volatile. It's sort of, is the Canadian government doing enough to protect our interests in the region?
No, I think we need to be doing a lot more. And I think what has happened in the last 6 months is people are looking at Indo-Pacific and Taiwan in light of what happened in Ukraine. So Ukraine, the Russian invasion of Ukraine, I think for a lot of people shook some complacency around thinking, well, that sort of thing just doesn't happen anymore. Well, actually, it does happen, and it can happen today. And the idea of countries invading each other, this is sadly part of the history of the world for a long time, and it's something that's happening right now. So I think what we saw with Ukraine was a real failure of deterrence, that more support was offered after the fact. But stronger signals needed to be sent earlier to show the Putin regime how costly an invasion would have been. And had we done better on that upfront demonstration of solidarity with Ukraine, an invasion would have been less likely. And now, of course, we need to do all we can to support Ukraine. That means tough sanctions. That means not providing waivers for sanctions. And this is something that I've spoken about: opposing liberals giving waivers for sanctions on Russia, and also supporting Ukraine. So that's Ukraine. So let's do the comparison here with Taiwan. Is I feel very strongly that we cannot have the same failure of deterrence here. We have to communicate to China just how high the cost would be to them on every level if they were to launch an invasion of Taiwan. So we need to be supporting Taiwan, but we need to be sending those powerful deterrent messages up front. And that's not. I mean, Taiwan is obviously a key focal point, but around other
entire Indo-Pacific, the entire region itself is under threat from China and expansionism.
I mean, we've seen aggressive action against
Vietnam, against Philippines, and Malaysia, all countries.
So lots of issues there. Taiwan's been a focal point, but there are others, and so I think one thing the Ukraine issue taught us is deterrence is key, right? That sending the message that Ukraine would be on its own kind of opened the door for a Russian invasion. We don't want to send that message with respect to Taiwan.
But now it looks like a stalemate. I mean, the war is it's going on. I think Russia is gaining a little by little. But what can Canada do now? I mean, how?
Well, I mean, I think it's sometimes difficult to know the precise strategic situation from a distance. I think the Ukrainian people are continuing to fight heroically, but we shouldn't be presumptive, right? A lot of people were very pleased to see how strong the Ukrainian response was. And the Russians, I think, expecting an easy takeover were shocked. But where we are now, the war is continuing. We have to continue to respond effectively, and that means, I think, two things. Number one, debilitating sanctions against the Russians.
That doesn't seem to work, isn't it?
I think one of the big challenges in terms of sanctions is Russia's continuing to export a lot of their energy resources, and Europe continues to be very reliant on Russian energy. So the most effective sanctions that we need to be able to apply are energy and natural resource related.
Canada can do its part here. I mean, we have a lot of oil which can be used by Germany and other European countries. Why are we doing that?
Well, it's been 7 years of failed energy policy.
That's the main thing. There's no way.
It's 7 years of failed energy policy. We need to turn that around as quickly as possible now, and the Liberals still really aren't willing to do it with the vigor and intensity that's needed. So I think we can do a lot more on supporting European energy security. That will facilitate tougher sanctions on Russia.
And but now coming to Taiwan, I mean, what if the U.S. gets involved in a war over Taiwan with China? Canada has to get involved, isn't it? Because of NATO? Well,
I mean, look, if we were in a hot war with China over Taiwan, that would be a very that's a situation we want to avoid.
Yeah.
Right? But way we avoid that situation is through deterrence, right? It's through preventing war.
Yeah.
By drawing that firm line. And I think if we had been clearer and firmer in supporting Ukraine prior to the Russian invasion,
China would have hesitated. China will hesitate. Yes.
Exactly. So I think that's where we need to be, is emphasizing deterrence, and that means standing strongly with Taiwan.
Because we don't know how the situation will turn out. Now today it seems that 23 Chinese jets and 8 ships are around Taiwan. Germany and France have sent fighter jets to the Indo-Pacific. I mean, the situation is a bit dire, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's a concerning situation. But let's look at kind of the history of tensions and conflict in the late 20th century. Right, there were cases of these kinds of standoffs. Right, Cuban Missile Crisis being the most well-known example.
Right, of course, yeah.
And we stood our ground. We engaged in dialogue, but we stood our ground. We didn't take this like, well, the only way to, let's cower in the face of a standoff. We did what we had to do, and in the end prevailed in the preservation of peace and in defending our lines and our principles. I think that's what we have to do here. But it requires strength, right? It requires strength and deterrence. Not appeasement. Appeasement leads to more aggression.
Appeasement doesn't work. No, it doesn't work.
But the goal is obviously to avoid conflict, right? So let's keep that firmly in mind, right? We are looking for peace through strength, not war caused by appeasement.
Right. That's true.
And the way to that peace is to be clear in supporting Taiwan and defending its democracy and not backing down.
When Parliament resumes, you have any specific items in the agenda?
Well, I mean, I've got continuing to work on the private members bill you mentioned and others, but in our party there will be a little bit of a likely a change around in terms of roles. We're going through a leadership race right now. Our new leader will be announced on September 10th, and after that, the new leader will identify some priorities, but there'll be a lot of continuity. Obviously, we'll continue to be following global events and engaging on these issues of Indo-Pacific and Canadian security and defending freedom of speech and human rights.
What about India? Anything about India going on in the Conservative Party? I mean,
well, again, kind of coming out of the leadership race, we'll be defining our direction on a broad range of issues. But I think there'll be continuity around emphasizing the need for Indo-Pacific security, partnership with democracies in the pursuit of Indo-Pacific security, a commitment to that kind of engagement around strengthening democracy and democracies and supporting human rights everywhere, and recognizing the economic opportunities. Of course,
that's the main thing
with the India relationship. There's so much in the way of people-to-people ties. One outpouring of that can be greater trade, and there continues to be hope. I know that we'll be able to move forward on a free trade deal with India. And
Ontario has been doing very well with the Ontario-India relationship. A lot of investments to and fro both places. I mean, lots of companies are now coming to Ontario. Ontario companies are going to India. So I think this model can be sort of made for all Canada. Saskatchewan is doing well too.
Absolutely. I think there are many areas of potential collaboration, and I mean, Ontario has a very large South Asian diaspora here, but large other parts of the country in Alberta, Saskatchewan, but increasingly everywhere. Canada's richly multicultural, and I see how in the area of trade and foreign policy, just how much the connections that are facilitated through diaspora communities can be a source of strength for a country.
Trade can be a very strong force.
Also, information and understanding. International development. I think we can do more on international development to kind of leverage remittances and other ways that diaspora communities engage.
Science, technology, even space. There's so many areas to be covered.
We are a globally connected country, and I think under the Liberals, there's been this sort of nice talk about diversity, but when it comes to global engagement, there hasn't been a substantive strategy. We've just kind of tried to be all things to all people. Canada has so much capacity to do more, to be a leader in the world, but sometimes we undersell that capacity. We've got so much capacity as a country. Part of it is linked to our domestic experience of diversity and inclusion. So I'm excited about what we're going to be able to do under our new leader to move our country forward.
Okay, MP Genuis, that was a quite enlightening conversation, and thank you for watching, MP Garnett Genuis, and thank you again.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.